Thank you. Hey, I want to welcome everybody. I want to say happy Father's Day to all the dads. We are so glad that you are here. I want to honor you and hope you're having a great day. Hope you got to check out the car show outside. If you did not, you can check it out later. But we're so glad that you're here. So whether you're at the Valencia campus, inside, outside, in the family room, in the lobby over at Common Grounds, or you're at the Canyon Country location, or you're at the online location watching from anywhere around the world, we're so glad that you're with us. And a special welcome to all of our guests. If you are new around here, we're so glad that you chose to be here. And maybe you didn't know you were coming to church, but somebody lied to you and said, we're going to brunch, and you ended up here. We don't care how you got here. We're just glad that you're here and hope you have a great experience being here. So, hey, it is Father's Day, and I thought we'd kind of kick off things with a top 10 list. The top 10 things a dad would never say. So, here we go. Anton? Number 10. Why, yes, you can have more money. I've got an endless supply of it. Number 9. There's no need to ask your mother. I'm allowing you to do anything you want. Number 8. I admit it. We're lost. Number 7, resting my eyes, baloney. I was definitely sleeping. Number 6, why should I try to fix this when we could pay a qualified professional? Number 5, fight all you want. There's no way I'm turning this car around. Number 4, kids today are keenly aware of how good they have it. Number 3, I'm tired of changing channels. You take the remote. And number 2, you don't need a curfew. Stay out as late as you like. And the number 1 thing a dad would never say, when I was your age, everything was awesome. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. All right. So you probably recognize some of those phrases as never heard from a father, and we're never lost. We're always just on our way to wherever we're going. So we're starting a new series today that kind of goes along with what we're talking about, and that is called Running with Giants. And what we're going to be talking about in this series over the course of the next 8 weeks is there's this passage in Scripture written to a church in the first century. And in this passage, the author is just encouraging the church with heroes of the faith. And he starts writing down all of these names and just kind of saying, hey, man, these are incredible people. They should encourage you. And even if you've never been to church before, never been around church, not sure what you think about God or about faith, you've probably heard of some of these people, or whether it's Noah or Moses or Jacob or Samson. And he goes through this long list of names, and at the end of it, he says this. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, he says, therefore, in light of all those names he just listed, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Now, this phrase here, great cloud of witnesses, I used to think that meant people watching you. Everybody's watching you. Are you going to be a good follower of Jesus? Are you going to be a good Christian? Everybody's looking at you. But what this is talking about is that long list of heroes he just mentioned there, that long list of people that are our heroes of our faith. And he says they are literally in the grandstands of heaven watching us, cheering us on. You can do this. You can do this. And he said, since we're surrounded by them, let us persevere. So over the course of the next 8 weeks, we're just going to let some of those heroes of our faith come out of the grandstands and take a lap with us. And we're going to learn from their life how that impacts our life today. And here's what you're going to find. These people are not just people of faith. They are people who are flawed. In fact, they make a lot of mistakes. In fact, I promise you, if you come here and you listen to some of their stories, you're going to go away thinking, I don't feel so bad about myself. I mean, they were really messed up. They did some stupid things, and we get to learn from their mistakes so we don't make the same mistakes, but the thing they did right was they kept moving forward with faith. So over the next 8 weeks, we're going to talk about one of those in here, but there's so many that are listed, we don't have the time to talk about every single one of them, so here's what we're going to do. I'll teach on one in here, but then I'll teach on another one via kind of a podcast. Actually, it's more of a webisode that I'll give you on my website where once a week you can watch this little video about 5 minutes long of another character. So you can get 2 a week by doing that. So if I know it's summer, you're traveling, make sure you watch it online, be a part of what's going on over the next few weeks. So we're kicking off this whole series, Running with Giants, today. Now, we're talking about giants, but let me just get this out of the way. There's a few giants we will not be talking about, okay? Here's this giant here, Goliath, all right? It's a great story. We might talk about David a little bit, but not Goliath. Here's another giant, okay? Eli Manning. Sorry, Patriot fans. He's your nemesis, but we're not talking about him. And Andre the Giant, okay? We're not talking about him either. Anybody want a peanut? Okay, Princess Bride, anybody? Thank you. All right. So we are going to talk about some great giants of our faith and how that impacts us today. And today we're going to talk about a guy who waited a long time to be a dad. In fact, he thought he would never have kids. He's older in his years. He's made his share of mistakes, and he will make even more mistakes in his life. But something happens in his life that changes everything, and we're going to learn some valuable lessons from this guy. Because the truth is, being a dad is a very important job. I mean, studies tell us that kids, when their dads are involved, they do better at sports, they do better in school, they do better in relationships. In fact, it's even proven that daughters whose dads are involved in their life make better decisions when dating. In fact, daughters often marry guys that remind them of their dad, which this is the question I get all the time. Rusty, is your father-in-law George Clooney? Okay? Because there's a tremendous amount of resemblance there, and I say, no, it's not. It's Brad Pitt, but that's another story. That's not why you're here. But truthfully, being a dad is a very important job, but it's also, let's just be really honest, it's a tough job. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, you work all day, and then you drive home in the LA traffic, and you get here, and then you try to engage with your kids, but you're exhausted. And then you're running around to all the extracurricular activities and the places you got to go and the things you got to do, and you just don't have anything left to give. And then some of you are in situations where, you're in two different homes and the kids are going back and forth, and when you get them, you're tired, but yet you want to be the fun dad, right? And you don't want to be the ambassador of no, constantly saying no, but you got to have boundaries, but yet you also want to have fun, and it's exhausting. It's also, difficult for us because sometimes we didn't have the best example of a father. And some of you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going with my gut. I'm looking around trying to learn from other people, but I'm not really sure how to be a good dad. Some of you feel like you've missed your chance. Like your kids are, they've grown up enough that they're making their own decisions, or some have even left the house, and you think, I've missed my opportunity. I wish we would have talked about this years ago. Well, we're going to actually talk about an individual today that really had this kind of feeling that we have. In fact, he felt a lot like this empty glass I have here. And we gave you a cup on the way in that kind of is not only a gift to you on Father's Day, but also as a metaphor of what we're going to talk about. Because the truth is, most of us, when it comes to parenting, feel as empty as this glass. We just feel like we don't have anything to give. There's sometimes I come home after a long day of meetings and making decisions, and I'm just mentally exhausted, and I walk in the door and I sit down, and my kids get into an argument about something, and I can see it's escalating, and I know the slap fight is about to begin, and I think I should step in, I should stop this, I should say something, but I got nothing left, and I think, we'll just treat it like a hockey fight. Let them wear each other out, and then all the energy's gone, right? But I know there are times that you feel like this as well. Maybe it's your teenager starts saying things to you like, I don't know what to do about this, Dad, or I don't know what decision to make, or I don't know what I should do with my life, or I feel really depressed. And you think, wow, I can't believe they're talking to me and they're being so honest with me, but I don't know what to say. Go ask your mother, because I got nothing left. And the guy we're going to talk about today, we read about in the scriptures as somebody who felt just like that. He was a guy that didn't have any kind of, great fatherly example, no great, a leader in his life to teach him how to be a dad. And then he comes to a place in his life where he's older and he feels like he's never going to have kids, and so he's really not even thinking about it. But one day everything changes. His name is Abraham. Even if you've never been to church before or never read the Bible, you might have heard this guy's name before, but he was really just about as empty as this glass. But God does something in his life that really shows us when we make these three decisions, it has the ability for God to fill our cup and to do so in such a way that we have something to give to the other people in our life. So what I want to do in our time remaining is I want to give you three things that I think will help you feel like you could be a better dad, be a better parent, even be a better friend if you have these things involved in your life. So I encourage you to write these things down, or if you have the RLC app open, all the points are going to be listed right there, and you can follow along as we go. So here's what you need to know about Abraham. This is about 2000 BC, and he is living at a time when nobody really moved around very much, nobody traveled, and he's at home, and everybody's pretty much born in the same place and lives in the same place and dies in the same place, and he's living out his days, and he's far along in his years, and it's just he and his wife and some extended family, and that's all it is. And God comes to him and he speaks to him. And he says, I want you to move. And the very first thing we learn about Abraham's life is a principle that we can all apply, and that is this. You got to say yes to God. When God speaks, you got to say yes. And now I know that many of us think you know God because your parents knew God, or your grandparents knew God, or there's a family Bible floating around somewhere. Somebody prayed one time and you were in the room and you think, oh, okay, I'm good. But that's not the same thing as you saying yes to God. And what Abraham has to deal with is God begins to speak to him, and the thing that God tells him to do is, I want you to move. Nobody moved back then. Nobody traveled anywhere. And God says, I want you to pick up your things, and you and your wife head out of town. Take a couple of your relatives with you, but it's just you guys, and I want you to go. Take a look at what Abram does. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. 75. Think about that. I mean, this is the stage of his life when he's not thinking about traveling or moving. He's thinking about pulling his pants up really high, driving with the blinker on at all times. That's his life, right? That's where he's going. And no disrespect to anybody who does that, because I'm very close to doing that myself, all right? But suddenly, God tells him, I want you to move. But nobody moved then. This means that Abraham has to admit that I don't know my future, which is a scary thing for us guys. That I don't know what's next, but I'm going to go. Now, back then, they were not world travelers. We like to travel everywhere. I heard this story about a group of American tourists that went to this little tropical island, and they wanted to get a tour, and they found this native tour guide to the island, and he said, I'll take you around. He's showing them all different sites, and they see this volcano off in the distance, and it's actually got smoke coming out of it, and there's lava running down the side of it. And it just looks really scary. And one of the American tourists says, wow, that looks just like hell. And the tour guide goes, man, you Americans have been everywhere. That's unbelievable, right? Come on, laugh it up. That's as good as it gets today, okay? There you go. We travel everywhere. We like to see everything. These people did not. They stayed right where they are. And Abraham suddenly is faced with this dilemma. Am I going to go? Now, here's where this intersects with our lives. There may be something in your life right now that God is telling you to leave. It's not been an audible voice, but you know deep in your soul it's the right thing to do. It might be to leave an abusive relationship. It might be to leave an addiction. It might be to leave a belief that you'll never amount to anything, you'll be just like your dad, you'll always be a failure. It may be a belief that church is just for women and children. You see, Abraham has to leave behind the past to move forward. And that's what he does. He says yes to God. Notice he does not have it all figured out. Notice God does not say, here's exactly what's going to happen. He just says go. And Abraham does. And he begins to trust God. So God says, okay, because of your trust in me, I'm going to start pouring a little bit of blessing into your life. And as a result of that, look what happens. Hebrews tells us about this in this passage. It says here, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and to go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. Suddenly, he now has an inheritance. And he went without knowing where he was going. And Abraham shows up. And Abraham goes. And Abraham sets out in faith. So let me ask you this. What is it that God is telling you to say yes to? Is it to say yes to start making church a priority? Is it to say yes to start being the spiritual leader of your home? Is it to say yes to start reading the Bible every single day? Is it to say yes, start talking to God every day? Is it to say yes to, kind of pouring into your marriage or to your kids? What is it God's telling you to say yes to? I got a feeling you know something. Step one, say yes to God. Okay, here's the second thing, and that is to fail forward. All of us are going to fail. All of us are going to make mistakes, especially as dads. We have our epic father fails. You heard some of them in the video that was shared just a little bit ago. I recall just a couple years ago taking my kids to school every morning, and I decided, I don't know why I thought about this, I thought, it's probably a good time to start sharing with the kids some classic ghost stories. I don't know. It just, popped in my head. Maybe it was from God. I doubt it. But I just thought maybe I should do this. Because growing up, I always heard those classic ghost stories you have around the campfire, or you're staying at a friend's house and they got the flashlight and they're telling a spooky story, and there's always the couple that ends up in the woods and the guy with the hook hand, and all those kind of stories. And I thought this will be fun to share. And we're in the car and the sun is up and everybody's happy. We're driving to school. So I start telling my kids these stories. Well, then they start going to school and telling their friends these stories. And suddenly I'm hearing that the kids are terrified and scared to death. My kids are now sleeping with the lights on at all times, I think, oh my goodness, what have I done? So then, not long after that, we're watching movies and we're trying to figure out what movie to watch. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's watch Jaws. I mean, how bad can that be? Because you don't remember, right? It was so long ago. And so we're watching it and somebody gets their leg bit off, and one of my girls runs out of the room screaming and now she won't go in the ocean anymore. I mean, I said, hey, come on back. It'll get better. Spoiler alert, it doesn't, so... You have these moments, you think, I probably should have done that a little bit differently, right? Everybody's got those kind of moments, and sometimes they're even far worse. Well, Abraham had far worse than that. Abraham made some horrific mistakes. For one, God had promised him he would be the father of many nations, but he wasn't having any kids, and he wasn't getting any younger, and so he has the bright idea, well, maybe I'll just have to sleep with somebody else. And so he does. Epic fail. And then he and his wife Sarah are headed into Egypt one day, and Abraham gets wise to this, that they're going to go in there, the Pharaoh's going to see her, and she's beautiful, and he's going to have him killed so he can have Sarah as his own in his harem. And so this is Abraham's idea. Take a look at this. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarah, I know what a beautiful woman you are. She's thinking, that's a nice compliment. Hang on. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but will let you live. She's thinking, oh, it's still pretty positive. And then he says, so here's what I want you to do. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. Here's the problem. She's going to end up in a harem, but at least he's going to live. All right? This is not a great moment in husbanding. Well, God reveals to the king or the Pharaoh of Egypt what's going on through a dream, and he goes, what are you doing? You almost got me in trouble with God. Get out of here. And Abraham has these moments in his life where he fails, but the question is, how will he handle it? You see, you and I have moments like this too. Maybe the failure in your life is moral. Maybe you've brought pornography into the home. Maybe you've stepped out of your marriage. Maybe you've said things that you shouldn't have said, done things you shouldn't have done. I remember hearing a story about a father whose daughter, junior high daughter, comes down the stairs wearing something pretty revealing, and he says, no, you're not wearing that. You get back upstairs and change. And she looked at him, literally confused, and said, I don't understand. You see other girls dressed this way, and you always comment about how great they look. Maybe you have said things you wish you could take back, done things you wish you could redo. What do you do in that moment? Maybe for you it's not morally, it's ethically. It's things like, well, we ordered water, but go ahead and get Sprite. Or we're going to lie about your age to get you into the movies a little cheaper. Or maybe your kids get to hear you call in sick when you're out on the lake. And you think it's no big deal. But then when they grow up and they start lying and cutting corners and cheating, you think, where'd they learn that? And so the question is, when we fail, what do we do? You can fail backwards, which means you deny it, or you act like it's no big deal, or you blame it on somebody else. Or you can fail forward and you could own it. You could sit down with your kids and say, here's what I did and it was wrong and I'm sorry. And you could go to God and say, I'm sorry. And that's what Abraham does. He keeps going back to God. He keeps getting right with God. He keeps making things right with his wife. And so this is what God does. He says, okay, I'm going to keep pouring into your life. And suddenly he says, you guys are going to have a baby. And here's what's surprising about that. He and his wife are 90. Can you imagine the conversations they're having about this? Will the birth be covered by Medicare? The good news is we can all eat baby food together and just kind of gum it. It's just go to Walgreens and get the Pampers and the Pins while you're there. Just we're all in this together, right? I mean, this is the blessing that comes out for his life. And this is what Hebrews tells us as a result of his faith. It was by faith that Sarah, together with Abraham, was able to have a child, even though they were too old and Sarah was barren. And Abraham believed that God would keep his promise. Into the story, right? God finally gave him a son. His son has grown up a little bit now, probably, in the 10 years old or so. And Abraham's thinking, this is so good. God promised me something, I trusted him. God promised me something, I trusted him. And now I've got this child. I may be the father of many nations. But then God comes to him one more time with another proposition, and it's different than the other ones. In the past, it was a trust me for what I'm going to give you. This is trust me for what I might take from you, which gives us our third principle, and that is this: you got to trust God with the process. Because sometimes God comes to us and he says, I want you to trust me for what's good awaiting you, but sometimes it's, I want you to trust me because something might be taken from you. And so this is what God says to Abraham. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. He's thinking, hey, this worked out good last time. Let's see what happens now. Then God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. And I want you to sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. There must have been a dramatic pause at this moment. Abraham must be wondering, what are you talking about? Remember the whole thing of father of many nations? This is the kid. He's supposed to carry it on. And now you want me to kill him? I can't believe you would ask that. Why in the world would you do that, God? Am I getting this? Is the cell signal dropping somewhere? Are you going through a valley right now? Because I don't understand what you're saying. But he trusts the process. Look at this next line. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there. Can you imagine how long he would have taken to do that, just hoping God would change his mind? And he arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac, and he laid him on the altar. Isaac's got to be thinking, what's going on here, Dad? I'm trusting you, but I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen here. And then he reached out his hand, and he took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. It's at this moment that the blessing that comes on Abraham's life is so much bigger than it ever was before. Because God looks at this man and sees, here's somebody who will trust me in everything. And God begins to pour out the blessings on Abraham's life that not only affect him, but affect his son and his family and his family and his family, and it never stops rippling onto our lives. I mean, you think about this, the impact that this has in his son's life, because his son watched his dad trust God. Can you imagine the conversations about this years later? Hey, Dad, remember that time you were trying to kill me? We were out there on, in the rocks. And I'm sure they might have joked about it from time to time, but the reality was he never forgot how much his dad was willing to trust his God. And so he did as well. And his kids did as well. And his kids did as well. And it went on and on and on until we meet Jesus. Take a look at how the Hebrew writer talks about this story. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead. A nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there is no way to count them. And when you read Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to do that over the course of the next few weeks, you're going to see individual after individual after individual, but only one family. And it's this one. All because a dad decided to say yes to God, to fail forward, and to trust God through the process. So here's my question for you this Father's Day. There's some of you that need to say yes to God. Never done that before. There's some of you that feel like a failure, but you need to move forward. And there's some that you feel like you're walking through the valley and you're not sure where God is leading you, but you need to trust. What is that for you? So I'm going to ask you right now, to just bow your heads and close your eyes, and we're going to take just a moment right now, and I'm just going to lead you in a time of prayer. Whether you're at our Valencia campus, Canyon Country, online, wherever you are, just bow your heads, close your eyes, and I'm just going to give you a chance to say yes to God. And so we'll start right there. If you're in a position right now and you feel like you have never said yes to God, but you're ready. Maybe you're a dad and you think, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to trust God in this. I want to invite you just to pray those words with me, just quietly right there in your own mind, right there wherever you are. Just between you and God, say these words. God, I'm going to trust you. God, I'm going to say yes to you. I'm asking Jesus to be the leader and the forgiver of my life. I give you my life and my family. God, there are many of us that have said that, and many of us are still kind of waiting and wondering. We know what it's like to fail, and we want to just fail forward. We want to move towards you. And so, God, is there somebody that we need to apologize to, or we need to make amends with, or we need to be honest with? God, would you put that on our heart right now? And God, there are some of us right now that we're fine trusting you with the blessings that you're going to promise to us, but we get real nervous when we feel like you're taking something away from us. So God, would you help us to trust you through whatever season we're in, and give us the strength to do that. God, as we prepare right now to take communion, we want to just prepare our hearts, God, for thinking of what you've given to us and the blessing you provided for us. We thank you for the gift of Jesus, and we pray all of this in his name. Amen.